Koichi Himawari is the main character of My Hero Academia Vigilantes. He's not as strong as All Might, Deku, or even Mineta. Well, at least not at the start. But this spin-off's main character has a pretty cool vigilante name, Nice Guy or Gentleman. Now, hear me out, because starting with Koichi Himawari, I'll introduce you to every vigilante in My Hero Academia, and tell you how this guy went from being gentleman to an internationally known pro hero called Skycrawler. But first, what does Koichi have in common with Izuku Midoriya? Well, just like Deku, he's a huge All Might fan. He even collects special edition All Might hoodies and wears them as his vigilante costume. It's gotten to the point where he actually gets mad if his tsundere vigilante friends call his old hoodie cheap and lame. And honestly, they're not. These hoodies are limited editions that come out every year, and Koichi has collected every single one except for one. You see, Koichi has a certified Silver Age color edition from 5 years ago. Little did he know this hoodie would spark his love life, and also play a part in why he missed the hero school entrance exam and failed to become a pro hero in Japan. Back in middle school, Koichi was serious about becoming a hero. He even applied to a hero high school in Tokyo. But on the day of the entrance exam, something happened. As he rushed to the exam site, he got lost, badly. While panicking and checking his map, he noticed something. A little boy was about to drown in a nearby stream. Even though he was running late, Koichi didn't hesitate. He shouted All Might's signature phrase and rushed in to save the kid. Thankfully, Koichi was fine, and the water wasn't deep at all. He got the job done quickly and even gave the kid his All Might hoodie before leaving. But what Koichi didn't know was that the boy he saved wasn't actually a boy. We'll get to that later. In any case, Koichi saw the whole thing as a wasted opportunity. If it hadn't happened, maybe he'd still be aiming to become a pro hero. But he doesn't regret it. If that kid ever makes it big as a hero, Koichi will be proud of himself too. Now, as one of the main Naruhata vigilantes, he's solving major cases like dealing with instant villains and even working alongside pro heroes like Captain Celebrity and Eraserhead. Koichi's quirk is called Slide and Glide. It's a movement-based quirk that lets him move around as fast as, well, a bicycle. To activate it, he needs to have at least 3 points of contact with the ground. He mostly uses it to get from one place to another faster than walking. Unfortunately, some people think he looks like a creep when he uses it, and even the cops have scolded him for it. At first, Koichi's skills were all about running away, believe it or not, groveling. But not just any kind of groveling. He mastered the art of kowtowing, only to use his quirk to slip away and escape. Koichi used his powers to do good, even if it was just small things like returning lost items, giving directions to a lady who looks like Midoriya's mom, guiding drunk people to the train station, or even throwing away trash properly. For him, it was just a refreshing way to help out. Eventually, this everyday hero work earned him the title of the Crawler, a full-fledged vigilante. The problem is, nobody actually calls him that. Instead, people keep calling him the Hauler. That said, Koichi's leveled up quirk is insanely fast, to the point where he can keep up with Ingenium. And in terms of mobility and sharp turns, he's actually even better. Ingenium saw his potential and even invited Koichi to join his agency after graduation. But once he realized Koichi was a vigilante, he took back the offer. He figured it was best to let Koichi follow his own path. Koichi was sad about it though. Like Midoriya, Koichi sometimes moves without thinking, and this instinct eventually leads him to discover a new ability. He learned how to release bursts of air from his palms, like repulsion blasts. However, since shooting projectiles without a hero license is illegal, he and Popstep had to be careful about how they used it. Not to mention, Koichi's kind nature and fear of hurting others made him hesitant to go all out and use his ability at full strength. This ability let Koichi stick to walls, and as it evolved, he figured out how to create a repelling force in the air, allowing him to float and accelerate through the sky. Turns out, he had this skill since he was a baby, but his mom smacked him every time he used it because she was worried. Over time, he turned his floating into full-blown flight by channeling more energy through his feet or hands. This newfound flight ability came in clutch when he had to save Popstep and escape Endeavor's brutal fire attacks. What to say, Endeavor was absolutely furious. Even All For One admitted that Koichi's quirk was crazy strong, and his combat instincts were far from normal. Koichi truly stepped into his role as a vigilante when he saved Popstep from some thugs, who, funnily enough, later became vigilantes themselves. Soon after, he met his mentor, Knuckle Duster, and together with Popstep, they started working to take down the illegal drug trade in Naruhata while helping pro heroes solve villain cases. During his battle against Number 6, Koichi even got backup from some of the biggest pro heroes like Midnight, Best Jeanist, and Eraserhead. As he famously told Captain Celebrity, he'd do what he could, and a real hero would handle the rest. That's always been his way of doing things. Unfortunately, after the massive destruction in Naruhata, the authorities treated Koichi like a criminal. But thanks to some behind-the-scenes scheming by Makoto and Captain Celebrity, Koichi was spared from further interrogation and officially became Captain Celebrity's sidekick. They even got him a contract that made him a pro hero in the US, under the name Skycrawler. Unfortunately for Koichi, the whole mess left him drowning in debt and facing lawsuits, so until he sorts it all out, he can't go back to Japan. Kazuho Hanayama, better known as Popstep, is a self-proclaimed freelance idol who performs guerrilla concerts in Naruhata without a permit. Despite that, she's got a massive fanbase eagerly waiting for her next performance. When Koichi first saw her, he actually thought her songs weren't great and her flashy makeup completely covered her face. But one thing that stood out to him was her quirk, Leap. Leap lets Kazuho jump through the air, but unlike Koichi's quirk, she needs a solid surface from which to push off. If she tries leaping from something weak, her jumps won't be as strong. She's not built for battle, so instead of fighting, she helps Koichi and Knuckle Duster in other ways, like gathering intel, evacuating people, acting as a decoy, or calling in pro heroes when needed. She also tracks villain activity online to narrow down their locations. That's because Kazuho doesn't dream of being a hero. Her goal is to become a famous idol and make good music, though she eventually gets to perform legally at Narufest. She often uses her quirk during live performances, and if the police show up, she quickly wraps up her act. Her entire idol career is a secret from her parents, including both her legal and illegal performances. As Popstep, she wears a flashy devilish outfit, the complete opposite of her real self, who is much shyer and more timid looking. Interestingly, Kazuho is actually the kid Koichi once saved, except he thought she was a boy back then. That nameless young boy was her all along. She still treasures the limited edition All Might hoodie Koichi gave her and has always wanted to properly thank him. That day, she was trying to jump across a river, but she didn't realize the muddy ground in deep water would mess up her use of Leap. If Koichi hadn't been there, she might not have made it. Ever since then, Koichi has stuck in her mind. But more than just thanking him, she wants to apologize. Because of her, he missed the entrance exams. Out of everyone, Kazuho believes in Koichi's potential to become a great hero the most. During one of the guerrilla performances, Koichi warned Kazuho that the police were on their way. Seeing this as her chance, she decides to follow him so she could finally thank him. Unfortunately, she ran into Soga Kugasaki and his gang, who attacked her. If Knuckle Duster hadn't stepped in to save both her and Koichi, they wouldn't have made it out alive. Kazuho is a classic tsundere. It's obvious she has feelings for Koichi, but she always hides them. Even Knuckle Duster once warned her that she should stop covering up her real emotions. Unfortunately, her vulnerability became the perfect opportunity for number 6. Disguised as Rokuro Nomura, the manager of Narufest's Marukanai performers, he lured Kazuho into a secluded basement and forced her to merge with the Queen Bee. With her mind taken over, Kazuho transformed from Popstep into Bee Pop. Now, she controlled a massive swarm of bees that grew more violent the more she sang. Her performance turned into destruction and chaos, and in the heat of it all, she finally said something to Koichi she never could as Popstep. "I hate you." Thankfully, Koichi saved her, and Midnight brought her back from the brink of death. After recovering, Kazuho finally returned Koichi's All Might hoodie, something she had held onto for so long. But more than that, her return stopped Koichi from completely giving up on being a vigilante and a hero. Real quick, before we dive into the next vigilante who actually became a major villain in the main series and introduce you to a former pro hero who became a quirkless vigilante, make sure to stick around until the end and hit that like and subscribe button. Go Beyond! Plus Ultra! Chizome Akaguro is a vigilante with an extreme sense of justice. In fact, it is so extreme that he takes it upon himself to pass judgment and execute criminals. Under his vigilante name, Stendhal, he wears a striking mask, rocks a samurai-like hairstyle, and fights with katanas and small blades. He sees himself as no different from the Naruhata vigilantes, including Koichi, who initially admired his unwavering sense of justice. But Knuckle Duster saw right through him. Guys like Chizome, who fight based on their own version of justice, are nothing but dangerous criminals. And in Chizome's case, that couldn't be more true. He views himself as a blade that cuts down villains, not just stopping them but outright eliminating them. He even keeps a list of those he plans to kill. Chizome's quirk, Blood Curdle, allows him to paralyze his opponents by just tasting their blood. The duration of paralysis depends on the blood type. Combined with his expert swordsmanship and agile movements, he can draw blood from his enemies in an instant, which is usually enough to end their lives with a single slash. Chizome also incorporates the kendo concept of Isoku Ito, maintaining the ideal distance from his opponent so he can strike at the perfect moment. His leg strength is so intense that non-seasoned fighters can't even react in time to his dashes. Chizome sees himself as a hero, an extraordinary being who pushes past his limits. To him, anyone who sides with evil, no matter how small their role, is just as guilty. That's why, even though he initially saw Koichi as similar to him, the moment Koichi helped one of his targets escape, Chizome immediately labeled him as a sinner, someone who needed to be eliminated. Chizome doesn't just have one persona. As Stendhal, he plays the role of a ruthless executioner. But without the mask, he's just a man who admires heroes. He'll even work with villains if it serves his mission, though he fully intends to cut them down when the time comes. But after his fight with Knuckle Duster, his philosophy shattered. Chizome realized that the true enemy wasn't just villains. It was the false heroes who stained society with their lies. This realization made him abandon Stendhal and take on something far more dangerous. Now, he no longer hides behind a mask. He doesn't waste time assassinating small-time villains. Instead, he dedicates himself to exposing and eliminating false heroes. Chizome Akaguro has transformed into something far more terrifying, a villain who guides bloodstains that cannot be wiped away. and you know him well. The world knows him as Stain. Soga Kugisaki is one of the people on Stendhal's list who needs to be eliminated. He's actually the leader of the trio that attacked Koichi and even tried to assault Kazuho. Soga's quirk, Spike, lets him grow spikes from his body, usually on his hands and feet. As someone with violent tendencies, he often uses his quirk to hurt or threaten others, like when he and his gang attacked Koichi and Kazuho in Chapter 1. At first, he even relied on illegal drugs like Trigger to make his quirk stronger. While under the effects of Trigger, Soga could grow spikes all over his body. Not just on his hands and feet, but on his back, head, and arms too, turning into something like a humanoid porcupine. Things got even worse when Stendhal nearly killed him. Queen Hachisuka forced him into a Trigger overdose using her bees. This time, he didn't just look like a porcupine, he turned into a full-blown porcupine kaiju. After using Trigger for the first time, Soga actually learned his lesson. Sure, he still got that same angry face, but he decided to fight using his own strength instead of relying on drugs. Part of the reason is that he doesn't want his friends to get hurt again, especially if it's because of him. Deep down, the reason he's so aggressive is because of how people treated him. He's sick of being called a monster and hates the wicked grins of those who see him that way. After being saved by Koichi and even treated by Kazuho, Soga slowly started to change. Like Koichi, he ended up working under Knuckle Duster, running errands, gathering intel, and even acting as bait when needed. In a way, he and his master are pretty similar. They don't want to put the others they care about in danger. Soga also helps Knuckle Duster by watching over his daughter, Tamao, when he's not around. He plays a big role in her emotional recovery and genuinely cares about her. He understands her wish to spend time with their father and does what he can to cheer her up, even playing the guitar for her. By the end of the series, Soga and Tamao become really close. And honestly, that ship might just be sailing. Maybe as a way to make up for what he did to Koichi and Kazuho, Soga spends a lot of time working behind the scenes to help them. He gathers intel, delivers messages from Knuckle Duster, and gives them the information they need. During the Bebop incident, when Koichi was being treated like a villain, Soga and his friends gave him a safe place to hide, and even helped him train so he can save Kazuho. Soga took charge, planning everything down to the smallest detail to make sure Koichi could get stronger in a short amount of time. Soga also acts as the main contact with the police. When it comes to underground vigilante work, he actually follows Knuckle Duster's teachings more closely than Koichi does. In fact, one of the biggest reasons he looks after Koichi and Kazuho is because Knuckle Duster told him to. When Kazuho was hospitalized and the media were all over her, it was Soga and his friends who stood guard to keep her safe. Soga doesn't trust the police much either, which is why he takes matters into his own hands even though he isn't licensed to do so. He doesn't see eye to eye with Sukaichi's strict by-the-book approach, so he refuses to tell him what Koichi is up to. For Sukaichi, vigilantism is wrong. But for Soga, if the police were doing their job right, there wouldn't be need for vigilantes in the first place. Soga has two friends he counts on when it comes to helping Koichi and Kazuho, one of whom is Rapto Tokage. Rapto was a straight-up villain at first, taking Trigger at the same time as Soga. He has a mutant-type quirk that makes him look, move, and function like a lizard. But under the effects of Trigger, he transforms into a prehistoric lizard with pterodactyl-like wings that let him fly. Just like Soga, he had some goon tendencies and was part of the group that attacked Koichi and Kazuho. As a flying reptile, he even chased Kazuho down to hurt her. But when a colossal titan-like instant villain appeared because of Trigger, both he and Popstep got caught in the chaos and crushed like juice boxes. Rapto ended up in the hospital, but thanks to his lizard body, he healed faster than expected and was already fine days before being officially discharged. That whole experience taught him a lesson. Sure, Trigger gave him a power boost and the ability to fly, but he doesn't want to go through that again. He knows it'll just land him in the hospital again. With Soga leading the group, Rapto is always ready to help, whether it's visiting Tamao, even though he's terrified of her dad, or supporting Koichi and Kazuho. He's the fun one of their crew and would never abandon his friends or their mission. Fun fact, his name, Raptokage, or Rapto Tokage, literally means raptor lizard. Tokage means lizard in Japanese, and Rapto is how Japanese speakers usually pronounce raptor. Moyoru Tochi is the last member of Soga's squad. His quirk, Ignition, lets him generate small flames from the top of his head. But under Trigger's influence, those flames spread across his upper body, making his skin look like a flaming rock while also toughening it. His firepower gets such a massive boost that Rapto jokes he looks like Endeavor. Of course, just power-wise, not in the bad dad way. Like Soga and Rapto, Tochi was a bully. He was cold-hearted enough to mess with Kazuho and even mocked Koichi's hoodie at one point. Of course, Koichi wasn't happy about it, but there wasn't much he could do against Tochi and the Goon Trio back then. Over time, Tochi had his own character growth. He let Koichi crash at his parents' house while recovering and helped Soga and Rapto move him around while the police were after him. He also helped guard the hospital to keep the media from sneaking in an interview with Kazuho and her family. And despite being terrified of Knuckle Duster, he still tagged along with Soga and Rapto to visit Tamao and cheer her up. Underneath his tough, fiery look, Tochi is actually a total scaredy cat. Rapto even calls him a big chicken. He's convinced that if number 6 shows up, they're all done for. That's why he was so relieved when Soga told him he could just run for his life when things got too dangerous. No need to go toe-to-toe with the main villain. When Soga was working overtime analyzing B-pop videos to figure out her abilities and come up with a solid plan, Tochi stepped in, patted his shoulder, and told him to take a break. If it was just a matter of finding decent videos, he could handle it instead. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Tochi realized that he actually enjoys helping people now. Iwao Oguro, better known as the first janitor, Knuckle Duster, is a vigilante dedicated to cleaning up villains in Naruhata. He leads the Naruhata vigilante trio and serves as the master to both Koichi and Soga. What's more, he used to be a pro hero and should have been dead a long time ago after All For One stole his quirk. Iwao first showed up in the story when he saved Koichi and Kazuho from Soga and his gang in an alley. But his real goal wasn't just playing hero. It was checking whether those three were under the effects of Trigger. This drug and the criminal syndicate behind it have personally affected Iwao's life, especially his family. His wife is deceased, and his daughter was possessed by Queen Bee, just like what later happened to Popstep. Despite his rough personality, Iwao saw real potential in Koichi. He recognized his strong desire to help others and figured he could use a hand in his vigilante operations. After all, doing it solo was too much work. But Koichi doubted himself. His quirk seemed weak, and he wasn't sure if he had what it took to be a hero. Iwao, however, didn't care about flashy quirks or hero licenses. To him, being a hero isn't about power. It's about stepping up when something needs to be done. Simple as that. Koichi's big realization, though: Iwao was basically just an unlicensed hero. Iwao's approach is, let's say, direct. I mean, his motto is literally punch first, ask questions later. You see, there's an obvious sign that someone's on trigger. Their tongue turns black, and if someone looks suspicious, Iwao won't wait. He'll just beat the living daylights out of them before asking any questions. Despite how tough he seems, Iwao is actually quirkless. This was confirmed in his fight with the Eraserhead. At first, Aizawa thought he might be resistant to his quirk, but he soon realized that Iwao was just a regular quirkless old man. But how did he go from being an internationally known pro hero to a quirkless vigilante? Back in his hero days, Iwao went by O'Clock, the high-speed hero. Even in China, he was famous under the name Hyper Squad Fist. His quirk, Overclock, let him boost his brain's perception to insane levels, making it seem like the world around him was moving in slow motion. This ability also enhanced his mobility and allowed him to move at ridiculous speeds. Basically, it was like supercharged focus mode. And you know who else has this ability? Well, this guy. You see, Overclock is very similar to Shin's ability to control and rewrite his own thoughts. And we made a video about that right here on every iconic character in Sakamoto Days. Go check it out. As I was saying, Overclock is known for his trademark use of his acceleration to land simultaneous blows. However, it has a cooldown period, and if the user gets distracted or starts panicking, it leaves them wide open for a counterattack. If they push their brain too hard trying to overdrive their thoughts, they'll burn through oxygen too fast, run out of breath, and struggle to use Overclock properly. And if they're knocked unconscious or put to sleep, game over. At some point, All For One got his hands on Overclock and passed it down to number 6. Number 6 idolized Iwao as O'Clock. He mastered the quirk so well that he became an absolute menace in Naruhata. And it's no surprise. Back in his hero days, Iwao was highly respected and completely different from the rough, brute force vigilante he seems like now. Iwao specialized in fighting crime and taking down illegal organizations, sometimes on his own, sometimes working alongside the police. Unlike his brawler style as a vigilante, back when he had Overclock, he focused on quick, decisive sneak attacks rather than long, drawn-out fights. That's probably why he was such a good friend to Tanuma. He also crossed paths with a young Mirko, and a fighter named The Rapper, who would later be known as Kendo Rappa, while working undercover as Ripper. Eventually, Iwao realized that he was nothing more than a cog in the machine to uphold society. In the end, he doesn't have the capabilities to fight back against the root of evil. He lost to All For One, had his quirk stolen, and fell into despair. His family fell apart. That's why, to Iwao, Koichi is a true hero. When his despair pushed him toward darker paths, it was Koichi's kindness that saved him. Iwao's personal mission was to save his daughter from the Queen Bee parasite possessing her. He managed to separate the parasite without harming Tamao, but sadly, his wife passed away soon after. When he distanced himself from Koichi and Kazuho to take on number 6 and the Villain Factory alone, it wasn't because he didn't care. He just didn't want to put them in danger. He was ready to throw his life away to take number 6 down. But thankfully, his students weren't about to let that happen. Soga refused to let Iwao die and leave his daughter behind, and Koichi stepped up to take on number 6 in his place. With Koichi rising as the Skycrawler and Kazuho chasing her dreams, Iwao returned to what he knew best. The pro heroes and Koichi were busy handling major threats anyway. As a vigilante, he's here to clean up the streets and take out these wannabe alleyway villains. But now that you know about every vigilante in My Hero Academia, there's still so much you're missing out on from other awesome series like Kaiju number 8 and Sakamoto Days. Want to see how these animes develop their strongest characters? Click here to compare them yourself.